Lester Clyde Isaacs was born in Marion, Kentucky on April 16, 1920 to Roy and Viola Isaacs. He lived in a small house on a 119-acre farm on Three Corners Road. The house had 3 bedrooms and an attic where the kids slept. He remembers that when it was winter, sometimes snow would come through the roof and land on their bed. They did not have indoor plumbing or electricity, so they had an outhouse. They used a fireplace to keep warm and kerosene lamps and candles for light. On the farm, only 30 or 40 acres were tilled to use to grow tobacco. Until he was 9 years old, he remembers helping his dad with the tobacco crops and other farm chores like weeding, chopping wood, emptying cold ashes out of the stove, and bringing water from the well. His dad was a quiet kind of guy, and his mom was very strict. When his mom said to do something, you did it with no arguments. He has wonderful memories of his parents, and remembers they had a good marriage. They had traditional holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. On Christmas, his dad would go cut down a tree, and they would eat and they would decorate it. Each kid would get a present. Every Sunday they would have a family gathering. Sometimes they would have all-day meetings at church. Dinner on the grounds. They bought flour and sugar, but they mostly ate what they grew on the farm. All 4 of Clyde's grandparents were also from Marion, Kentucky, and they were very nice to him. He said when he was a kid, the only food he would not eat was lamb, or mutton as he called it. He says whenever his grandma, Melissa Ann Isaacs, would serve lamb for dinner, she would always make 2 pork chops for him. Today he still hates lamb. Clyde had 5 brothers and 1 sister. In Kentucky, he had 1 older brother, Paul, and a sister, Leona, and 2 younger brothers. In 1927, flu epidemic came through, and everybody but the younger brothers, Milford and J.T., survived. Around 1929, Clyde went to high school at Stivers High in Dayton, Ohio. He quit school when he was 17 to work at Line Tool Company. He was a punch press operator. He was proud of himself because he was earning more money than his dad was. He made 59 cents an hour. He worked there for about 7 years. From about 1943 to early 1944, Clyde went to work at Frigidaire, making drill press frames for 30 caliber machine guns for World War II. His dad needed help on the farm in Kentucky, so he went there for 6 months. When he went there, he was drafted into the U.S. Army. He thinks if he stayed at Frigidaire, he would not have gone into the Army. When I asked how Clyde met his wife, he told me his story. Me and my cousin were driving their car around, and we saw these girls on the sidewalk. We stopped, and Anne came running over because she thought we were somebody that she knew. And the minute she put her head in that car, I fell in love with that woman. And it took me 10 days to get a date with her. They went together for 6 months, and then he asked her to marry him. She did not answer right away, but in 10 days later, she said yes. Then Clyde went to ask Anne's Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred said that he was tickled to death to get rid of her, so they were married until April 26, 1941. He remembers it was 1941 because he had to wait until he was 21 to get married. He was 21 because his mom would not let him get married before that. They were married in a priest's parlor instead of a church. Uncle Fred was the best man, but he does not remember who else was there to stand up for them. He grew up in Mormon church, and when he was a teenager, he was an elder in that church, but in 1997, he was baptized into the Catholic Church at St. Henry in West Carrollton. He says God's taken very good care of me. In November 1944, he was drafted into the U.S. Army of World War II. They took them over on the Atlantic Ocean on cruise ships from Baltimore, Maryland to England. They had training exercise in England till at Thanksgiving, and they crossed the English Channel on smaller boats. They landed in Le Havre, France. He was a private in the 76th Infantry Division of General George Patton's Third Army. He said, "We marched across France, and Patton rode across." They marched and they fought the German army until he got to Dresden, Germany. He said it was the coldest he had ever been in his life. They had thin blankets and they slept wherever they could. He always kept an extra pair of socks inside of his shirt, and he would stop and change them when his feet got cold and wet. His lieutenant saw him sitting down on the ground, and he threatened him with the court-martial. He didn't get up. Clyde shut up, and the lieutenant did. He said he always had one hot meal a day, and they gave them K rations the rest of their meals. One time he got a short vacation of furlough, and they flew him to Paris. After he was back with his company, they rode in trucks 40 miles to Belgium to reinforce the 85th Division at the Battle of the Bulge. After that, they sent them back home for another furlough. He was going to have to go to Japan after that. This time, he was on army boats, but he would not go below deck, so he slept in a lifeboat. On the way back, they found out that the war was over, and he was able to go home instead. Clyde and Anne have 3 girls named Butch, Henry, and Pete. Those are their nicknames. The oldest daughter, Patricia Ann Butch, was born in 1941. 2 years later, they had Kay Helena Henry. That was before World War II. After he returned from the war, they had Regina Diane Pete. In 1946, Anne decided what their names were going to be. They lived in Dayton, Ohio on Fairgrounds Avenue. One funny story he remembers about Pete was one time that she wore a red coat and she was standing on the back porch and a goat saw her out from the field, and he ran straight through the screen door and butted her over. He picked her up and said it was very funny. I asked him about raising his children. He said, well, really, I did not raise them. The little woman did, Anne did. The thing that is really special about his family is that he has 5 generations. He has 4 grandchildren. Patty has 3 children, Scott, Kelly, and Dina. Regina has 1 daughter named Gina. He has 5 great-grandchildren. He has great-grandchildren. His granddaughter Kelly has 3 children, Nikki, Megan, and Corey. And Scott has 2 boys, Bobby and Luke. His great-granddaughter Megan has 2 boys, Danny and Gabriel. Those are his 2 great-great-grandsons. It is very special because there are not very many people who have great-great-grandchildren. One of the most memorable vacations he ever took was on a road trip with his grandson Scott and his wife Maria. They started in New Orleans. They came back to Dayton up through the Mississippi and Nashville. I know Clyde because he has been friends with my mom for over 26 years. In 1987, my mom bought a house in West Carrollton on the same street that he and Ann lived on. My mom had a black dog named Max, and he got loose one time. Ann saw him and called her, and he went straight to her. My mom sent them tickets to France so they could visit her in France. Then my mom and my dad took them to Paris for a few days. It was almost 50 years after the last trip to Paris during the war. Clyde remembers sitting under the Eiffel Tower when it still had grass under it. He said, never in a million years did I think I would ever come back here. I asked him if he remembers anything about me when I was a baby, and he said I was just proud to see a little boy, and come to think of it, he was a pretty nice boy, and I think he still is. I have always called him Papa since I have been born. He has always been a part of our family. He is like my grandpa. He comes to all the events at school for families and grandparents. He goes to my ball games, comes to church with us every Sunday. I stay overnight, we play games and watch TV together. I love my Papa. What is special about Lester C. Isaac? He has 5 generations in his family. He has 2 great-great-grandchildren. He will be 93 by the time I finish this book. Wow, he quit smoking cold turkey. He was married for almost 60 years. He served in World War II and came back. He worked for the same company for 30 years. He had a job since he was 9 years old. He has been in every state on the east side of the Mississippi except for Vermont. He's a remarkable man. Sean's reflections. It was really, really fun doing the Legacy Project because I got to learn so much more about my Papa. I've known him my whole life, and I love him very much. Sean, 2013.